Reject the role you are not who they cast you to be. Welcome back. I'm Adeline Atlas, 11 times published author, and this is the Escape series where we dismantle the narcissistic family system and reclaim the truth of who you are. This video is titled, Reject the Role You Are Not Who They Cast You to Be, and it's for every survivor who has ever been boxed, labeled, blamed, or conditioned into an identity that was never theirs to begin with. It's time to tear down the roles they forced on you and reveal who you truly are beneath the script. Narcissistic family systems operate like psychological stage plays. Every person is cast into a role to preserve the illusion of the narcissist's perfection. These aren't random roles, they're calculated assignments designed to control behavior, suppress dissent, and reinforce the narcissist's fragile identity. The scapegoat is there to absorb the blame. The golden child is elevated to reflect the parent's idealized self. The enabler keeps the show running, and the flying monkeys act as the mob that polices anyone who steps out of line. What most survivors don't realize for decades is this. None of these roles reflect their truth. They're not about who you are, they're about what the system needs you to be in order to survive. And if you want to escape, the first step is simple. Reject the role. Let's start with the scapegoat. This role is often assigned to the child who is the most emotionally aware, the most honest, the most intuitive. Ironically, it's often the child with the most integrity who becomes the one blamed for everything. Why? Because the scapegoat sees the dysfunction and refuses to participate in the illusion. That's dangerous in a narcissistic system. When you see too clearly, they need to discredit you. They call you dramatic, unstable, selfish, ungrateful, not because you are, but because you won't play along. You refuse to silence your truth, and for that, you're punished. This role isn't given because you're flawed. It's given because you threaten their control. The scapegoat is the emotional threat, and the more you try to speak truth, the more they double down. Now let's look at the golden child. This child is not seen as a full human being either. They're used as a mirror. The narcissistic parent chooses the golden child based on who reflects back the image they want to see: obedient, successful, admiring, easy to control. The golden child is rewarded for compliance, not authenticity. They're praised not for who they are, but for how well they perform. On the surface, it looks like favoritism, but underneath, it's another prison. The golden child grows up disconnected from their true self. Often, they don't even realize it until adulthood, when the weight of always being perfect becomes unbearable. They were conditioned to fear failure, to avoid conflict, to never question the system because their worth was tied to how well they upheld the fantasy. Then you have the enabler, often a spouse or a passive family member, whose job is to maintain the structure. They deny abuse, minimize harm, and dismiss the scapegoat's truth as exaggeration. Not because they're evil, but because facing the truth would shatter their own coping mechanisms. They need the story to remain intact. The enabler is not neutral, they are complicit. By protecting the narcissist and invalidating the truth teller, they reinforce the abuse dynamic. And finally, the flying monkey's siblings, relatives, even family friends who get weaponized to attack the scapegoat. These people are either too afraid to think for themselves or too invested in the illusion to let it fall. They parrot the narcissist's lies. They say things like, "You always overreact," or "It wasn't that bad," or "Can't you just move on?" They're not helping. They're protecting the system, often without realizing it. So what does it mean to reject the role? It means stepping out of the psychological costume they shoved you into and refusing to perform. It means you stop accepting blame that isn't yours. You stop trying to prove your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop explaining your side to those who never intended to listen. Rejecting the role doesn't require a confrontation. It requires clarity. It requires internal certainty that says, I see what this is, I know who I am, and I'm not playing this game anymore. When you stop reacting to the bait, the system loses its grip. When you stop defending yourself, the narrative breaks down. When you stop seeking their approval, you take your power back. And make no mistake, they will feel that shift. The moment you deviate from the role, the backlash begins. You'll be accused of betrayal. You'll be called selfish, heartless, ungrateful, cold. That's the system panicking. Because when one person exits the script, everyone else is forced to confront the dysfunction. You've pulled back the curtain, and now the performance is in jeopardy. Rejecting the role is not a soft awakening. It's not a gentle realization. It is a psychological revolution, a spiritual rebellion. It is choosing to betray the lie rather than betray yourself. It is refusing to hold the guilt that was never yours. The narcissistic system will use shame like a leash. It will pull you back with guilt trips, fake apologies, sudden affection, or public humiliation. These are not signs of love. They are signs of panic, because the system only works if you believe you are what they say you are. But you're not. You are not their scapegoat. You are not their emotional trash bin. You are not their failure, their black sheep, their problem child. You are not their illusion. You are the one who saw too much. And instead of becoming part of the performance, you became the whistleblower. Of course they painted you as the enemy. That's what systems do to the truth teller. That's what cults do to the defector. That's what fragile egos do when confronted with accountability. The role is not your identity, it's a mask they needed you to wear. And once you remove it, the entire dynamic starts to collapse. That's when real healing begins. But here's the part most people aren't prepared for. When you reject the role, you enter an identity void. Who am I if I'm not the scapegoat? Who am I if I'm not fixing everyone? Who am I without their approval? That void is terrifying, and it's why so many people run back to the role. Because even a false identity can feel safer than no identity at all. But you can't heal by going backward. You have to walk through the void. You have to excavate the self that existed before the assignment. That younger you, the one with curiosity, clarity, sensitivity, defiance, is still in there. You have to rebuild from that place. And that rebuilding process is sacred. It's slow. It's often lonely. But it is yours. And no one can take it from you. You will have to confront internalized lies. You'll hear their voices in your head long after they're gone. You'll question your memory, your motives, your worth. That's the residue of emotional manipulation. That's what happens when your mind was trained to doubt itself. But with every truth you claim, with every lie you shed, your nervous system begins to heal. Your sense of reality stabilizes. Your voice gets stronger. And your new identity begins to form not around survival, but around sovereignty. This is why rejecting the role is not just personal healing, it's generational warfare. Because when you refuse to pass the dysfunction forward, you break a chain that may have existed for centuries. You tell the next generation, you don't have to be who they say you are. You can choose your own name, your own voice, your own truth. And in that act, you become the interruption. You become the anomaly. You become the ancestor that future generations will thank for choosing to walk away. The narcissistic system cannot survive when you see it clearly. Its power depends on confusion. It thrives on self-doubt. That's why clarity is your greatest weapon. When you understand that their guilt trips are manipulation, their compliments are control mechanisms, their rage is a deflection, you stop taking it personally. You stop internalizing it. And you start moving differently. You start setting boundaries without explanation. You start protecting your peace like it's sacred because it is. You start choosing relationships where mutual respect is the baseline, not the reward. You stop performing. You stop shrinking. You stop managing other people's emotions at the cost of your own sanity. You start living like your soul matters because it does. Let this be your reminder. Roles are tools of control, not reflections of truth. Not every family has earned access to who you really are. Not everyone is qualified to speak on your story. And no one, absolutely no one, gets to tell you who you are unless you let them. You don't owe the system your silence. You don't owe them your presence. You don't owe anyone the performance of being someone you never chose to be. You owe yourself truth. You owe yourself healing. You owe yourself freedom. And it starts the moment you reject the role. Hi, I'm Adeline Atlas, 11 times published author, and what you just watched is part of my signature program, the Chosen One series inside School of Soul. This series is not just a course, it's a blueprint for those who know they were different from the start. The black sheep, the scapegoat, the truth teller, the cycle breaker. Inside, you'll discover the family roles playbook, the golden child, the scapegoat, the enabler, the lost child, and how to finally step out of the part you were cast in without consent. How the black sheep becomes the goat, turning rejection into radical transformation in leadership. How to break generational curses and rewrite ancestral contracts so the pain stops with you. And how to recognize and escape modern forms of spiritual and technological targeting, from gang stalking to synthetic synchronicity. This isn't just about survival. It's about awakening, about reclaiming your voice, your lineage, and your destiny as one of the chosen ones. Click the link below to access the full series now, because the role ends the moment you decide it does, and the real script begins with you.